20% of global wastewater, something like 8% of greenhouse gas emissions. I mean, that's the fashion industry.
Yeah, it's pretty stark when you put it like that. Hard numbers.
Exactly. And if you're here listening, you want the real story on sustainable fashion, quick but thorough.
Mm-hmm. And today that's what we're doing, getting into what actually makes people buy sustainable clothes, this green apparel buying behavior, or GAB.
Right.
And maybe even more importantly, what stops them? What are those hurdles?
And we're basing this on solid ground. We've got this recent academic review, I Don't Buy It, a critical review, you know the one.
Yeah, from Sustainability 2025, Hogh, Braun, and the team.
What's great is it pulls together 15 different studies. It's trying to figure out what drives actual buying, not just, good intention.
Exactly. It's about behavior, not just attitudes. And this review gives us that bigger picture, helps us see the patterns across all that research.
So we can find the factors that really seem to matter consistently.
Right. We're going to walk through 5 main categories of what influences people. It's like a shortcut to getting properly informed.
Okay, so mission accepted. Pull out the key stuff from this research. Help you understand why some people reach for the green option and others, well, don't.
Let's dive in.
So first up, what kind of studies are we actually looking at here?
Okay, so the review covered 15 empirical studies, mostly using surveys, questionnaires, basically.
Familiar stuff.
Yeah. And they often use cross-sectional designs. So like a snapshot in time, collecting data just once.
And the number of people in these studies, it varied a bit.
Quite a bit, yeah. And most of this research is pretty recent, mostly post-2015. Shows it's a hot topic right now.
Definitely. And where was this research done? Mostly Western countries.
Overwhelmingly, yes. Industrialized nations. The review authors kind of speculate that, well, it makes sense. Because in wealthier places, people maybe have more disposable income, more freedom to choose sustainable options over just basic needs.
Right. If you're struggling to make ends meet, a pricier, eco-friendly shirt might not be top priority.
Exactly. Survival first.
And who are they mostly studying? I think you mentioned a pattern there.
Mostly younger women. That's who predominantly shows up in these study samples.
Okay, that's important context. A potential limitation, maybe.
Definitely something we need to keep in mind when we think about how generalizable these findings are. We'll come back to that.
Got it. So that's the what of the research. Now, how are researchers thinking about this? What theories are they using?
Right, the frameworks. They're crucial for making sense of why we do what we do. The big one, highlighted in the review, is the theory of planned behavior, TPB.
TPB. Okay, break that down for us.
So basically, TPB says your intention to do something comes from 3 things. Your attitude towards it, do you think it's good or bad?
Okay.
Then, subjective norms. What do you think people important to you expect you to do?
Peer pressure, sort of.
Kind of, yeah. Social expectations. And third, perceived behavioral control. How easy or difficult do you believe it is to actually do the behavior?
Right. Can I actually do this?
Exactly. And then your intention, plus your actual control over the situation, influences whether you do it.
So for sustainable fashion, if I like the idea, think my friends would approve, and I feel like I can actually find and afford it,
then you're much more likely to intend to buy it and ultimately more likely to actually buy it.
Makes sense.
And the review even mentions a study using TPB. It found that things like having enough money and finding sustainable stores easily boosted people's perceived behavioral control. They felt more capable. And that feeling directly led to stronger intentions and more actual buying.
So practical stuff really matters. It's not all just in your head.
Not at all. Those practical barriers, or lack thereof, are key.
Okay, TPB is one major lens. What else?
Another important one is the theory of consumption values. This looks at why we value products, what we get out of them.
Like, does it work well? Does it make me look good? That kind of thing.
Exactly. Functional value, social value. And importantly for us, green consumption values.
Green consumption values. Tell me more.
These are all about environmental concern in our buying choices. And it breaks down further into biospheric values, caring about nature itself, and altruistic values, caring about the impact on other people now and in the future.
So deep-seated beliefs about protecting the planet and people.
Right. And if you hold those values strongly, they're powerful drivers for choosing sustainable options.
So my core beliefs about the environment and society can shape my shopping cart. Seems logical. Any other key theories?
There's also the value attitude behavior hierarchy model. This one tries to tackle that famous attitude behavior gap.
Yes, the gap, where we say one thing and do another.
Precisely. This model suggests our basic values influence our specific attitudes, and those attitudes then influence our behavior.
So it's like a chain reaction.
Kind of. And it helps explain why someone might say they care about the environment, that's the value and maybe attitude, but still buy fast fashion because, say, the attitude towards the price of sustainable stuff is negative.
So just having the value isn't enough. The specific attitude towards the action matters.
Exactly. It shows why good intentions don't always translate. And the review notes other models are used too, but maybe just in 1 or 2 studies each. So the field is still exploring different angles.
Okay, that gives us a good theoretical map. Now let's get to the factors themselves, the nitty-gritty. What did these 15 studies actually find influences our sustainable fashion choices? You said 5 categories.
Yep, 5 main buckets. Let's start with sociodemographic factors, the basics about us.
Age, income, education, gender, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And the findings are, well, interesting. Take age. It seems older age actually correlates positively with GBB.
Really? Older people buying more sustainable fashion?
That's what some studies suggest. One even found Gen Y millennials were more likely to buy organic or sustainable materials than Gen Z.
Huh. I might have guessed the opposite. You think of younger generations being more activist.
Right. It challenges assumptions. But then again, another study looking specifically at political consumption, like boycotting brands or deliberately buying ethical ones.
Okay.
That one found older age was linked to less of that kind of active political buying or avoiding.
So, it's complicated. Depends on exactly what behavior you're looking at.
Very nuanced, yeah.
What about money? Does having more income make you more likely to buy green?
It seems so, at least for that political consumption aspect. The study found a positive link between a better financial situation and engaging in those boycotts or ethical purchases.
Makes sense. Having more financial breathing room gives you more choice, maybe lets you prioritize values over just price?
Plausibly, yes. When budgets aren't as tight, those sustainable options might seem more accessible.
And gender. Education level, did those show up as strong factors?
You know, surprisingly, the review said no. Not consistently across the studies. Yeah. While maybe one study here or there found something, overall, gender and education didn't emerge as major reliable predictors of GBB in this particular set of research.
Okay, so demographics give us some clues, but definitely not the whole story. Let's move inside the personal factors. What's going on psychologically?
Right. This is a big category. Values, motivations, attitudes, knowledge. Lots going on here.
Let's start with values. What kind of core beliefs drive people towards sustainable fashion?
Okay, so using Schwartz's value theory, one study found ethical consumers really value self-direction, independence, and thought and action, and universalism, caring about everyone and nature.
So autonomy and a broad sense of care.
Mm-hmm. Another study found self-transcendence values, again, focusing on others' welfare, were positive drivers. But self-enhancing values, things like personal success, power didn't seem to have a significant effect either way on JB.
Interesting. So it's less about personal gain and more about outward-focused concern for others and the planet.
That seems to be the pattern. It connects strongly to those green consumption values we mentioned. If you personally prioritize the environment when shopping, you're more likely to choose green.
Makes sense.
And they even found links between, say, voting for green or left-leaning parties and doing that political consumption thing in fashion. Plus, just feeling a personal moral obligation to be responsible seems key.
So a sense of duty. Okay, values are the foundation. What about specific motivations for buying clothes? Why choose sustainable specifically?
Well, the review actually pointed out there isn't a ton of research specifically on JBB motivations, which is surprising.
Huh.
But one study did pull out a couple of themes. One was wanting to reduce overall consumption, buy less, buy better.
Your slow fashion idea.
Exactly. And the other motivation was expressing your self-image, using clothes to show who you are and what you stand for.
Right. So either less is more or my clothes reflect my values. Both seem plausible.
Definitely.
What about just general attitude? If I think sustainable fashion is a good thing, am I more likely to buy it?
Yes, absolutely. The research is pretty consistent on this. A positive attitude towards sustainable fashion is linked to both intending to buy it and actually buying it.
That fits with the theory of planned behavior.
It does. And it's no surprise that people who already see themselves as ethical consumers have much more positive attitudes towards ethical stuff in general.
But there's that gap again, right? Liking the idea doesn't always mean opening your wallet.
Precisely. Attitude's important. A necessary step maybe, but not sufficient on its own. Price, style, convenience. They can still get in the way.
Okay. Let's talk knowledge. Does knowing about the fashion industry's impact matter?
It seems to. Several studies suggested a lack of deep understanding is a barrier. People might vaguely know fast fashion isn't great, but maybe they don't grasp the specifics, the water pollution, the chemical use, the labor issues.
So not knowing the full story means less motivation to change.
That's the idea. Ignorance might not be bliss, but it can lead to inaction. On the flip side, strong environmental awareness was found to be a really solid predictor for buying sustainably.
Awareness, okay.
And crucially, people need to be able to tell what's sustainable easily. If it's confusing or unclear at the point of sale, forget it.
Clarity is key. Got it. What about perceived consumer effectiveness, PCE? What's that?
PCE is basically your belief that your choices actually make a difference. Can my buying one organic cotton shirt really help the environment?
Ah, the drop in the ocean feeling.
Exactly. If you feel like your actions don't matter, low PCE, you're less likely to bother making the sustainable choice. But ethical consumers tend to have higher PCE. They believe their choices do have an impact.
So feeling empowered is important.
Very much so.
And let's circle back to perceived behavioral control, PBC. We mentioned it with TPB. How does feeling like you can buy sustainable fashion play out?
Well, PBC is about how easy or hard you think it is. If you perceive sustainable fashion as easy to find, easy to afford, easy to fit into your life, your PBC is high.
And high PBC is good for JBB.
Yes. As TPB predicts, higher PBC leads to stronger intentions and more actual sustainable buying. Making it feel doable is critical.
Reduces the friction. Okay, last one in this personal factors bucket. Green trust. What's that about?
Green trust is simply whether you believe the environmental claims brands make. There's so much talk about greenwashing.
Right. Companies just pretending to be sustainable.
Exactly. And if consumers are skeptical, if they don't trust the labels or the marketing, that's a huge barrier. But if green trust is high, if they believe the claims are legit,
then they're more likely to buy.
Significantly more likely, yes. Trust is a major predictor of JBB. Transparency and credibility really matter.
Wow. Okay. So personal factors are huge. Your values, motivations, attitude, knowledge, feeling effective, feeling capable, and trusting the claims all push you towards or away from sustainable choices.
It's a complex internal landscape.
Definitely. What's next? Social influence, what the people around us think.
Exactly. How our social world shapes our buying. The review mainly looked at subjective norms here.
Which is what I think others expect me to do.
Pretty much. What you perceive your important social groups, friends, family expect regarding your behavior.
So if my friends are all buying vintage or sustainable brands,
You're probably more likely to consider it, or even feel some pressure to do the same. The studies generally show people are more inclined to buy sustainable fashion if they see their peers doing it. It normalizes the behavior.
does that directly make me buy it, though, or just makes me think about buying it?
Good question. In TPB, norms usually influence intentions first. Some studies in the review found that linked perceived social expectation leads to stronger intention to buy sustainably.
Okay.
But other studies found mixed results. That link wasn't always strong. So social norms seem to play a role, but maybe their direct power varies.
So it's an influence, but not necessarily a deciding factor on its own every time.
It seems that way based on this review.
Any other social aspects?
The review briefly mentioned face saving, maintaining a good social image, and social responsibility being potentially more important for ethical consumers.
Wanting to look good, morally speaking.
Sort of, yeah. Especially in cultures where face is a big deal, and just generally acting for the good of society. While these weren't the main focus here, the authors acknowledge other research shows social influence is broadly important in sustainable consumption.
Okay. So social factors matter, even if the exact mechanism via subjective norms isn't perfectly clear-cut in every study. Let's move to behavioral factors, our actual habits.
Right, what we do regularly. And habits are powerful. Often our established routines, like always hitting the same fast fashion stores, are a big barrier.
The path of least resistance?
Exactly. It's familiar, it's easy, why change?
Are there any habits that actually help people buy sustainably?
Interestingly, yes. The review mentioned that people who prefer shopping online or via catalogs tend to show more JB.
Huh. Why would that be?
Maybe because online it's easier to research, compare products, check materials, read sustainability info. You're not just grabbing something off a rack.
More opportunity for informed choice.
Potentially. Also, People who are generally more inclined to seek out product information, like actively checking material labels, tend to make more conscious choices.
So being an engaged, information-seeking shopper helps.
It seems to correlate positively, yes.
Okay. And we keep mentioning behavioral intention. How strong is that link to actual buying?
Well, according to TPB, intention is the main direct predictor of behavior. And the JABB studies generally back this up. Stronger intention usually leads to more sustainable purchasing, especially for self-identified ethical consumers.
So wanting to do it is still really important.
Absolutely. Fostering that intention is a key first step.
But that gap persists. Intention isn't everything.
No, it isn't. As the review stresses, even with strong intentions, things get in the way. Maybe you think sustainable clothes look dowdy, or you worry about the cost.
Right. Perceived downsides.
Exactly. Those perceptions can derail the best intentions, leading to that gap between wanting to buy green and actually doing it.
Okay, so habits can hinder us, being informed can help, and intention is crucial but fragile. Final category, product attributes. The clothes themselves.
Yep. Price, availability, image, or style, and the consumption values tied to the product. Tangible stuff.
Price, always a big one. Is that higher cost the major deal breaker everyone assumes?
It's definitely perceived as a major barrier by lots of people, and often for good reason: better materials, fairer wages. That costs more.
Understandable.
For some, it's just too expensive, full stop. For others, maybe they just don't see the value for the extra money compared to cheaper options.
But you sometimes hear the opposite, right? That a higher price can make something seem more desirable, higher quality.
True. The review acknowledges that. Sometimes a higher price can align with someone's self-image. I buy quality, I invest in ethical products. It can actually boost motivation for some.
A status signal, almost.
Could be part of it. But interestingly, some studies in the review found price sensitivity didn't significantly affect behavior, though the authors warn that might be down to how the studies were done.
So, price is complex. A barrier for many, maybe a motivator for some, maybe less important than we think in certain contexts. Messy.
Very messy. Needs more research to untangle fully.
What about just finding the stuff? Availability.
Big barrier.
Yeah.
If people can't easily find sustainable options they like in styles and sizes they need, they'll likely give up.
Even if they're motivated.
Even then.
Yeah.
And the review mentioned that weird perception that sustainable clothes are mostly for women, limiting perceived availability for men too.
Hadn't thought of that angle. So access and awareness of access are key. What about the look? The image problem.
Huge factor. If sustainable clothes are seen as frumpy, outdated, not trendy, that's a major turnoff for many.
The eco-warrior wearing burlap stereotype?
Kinda, yeah. Fast fashion offers constant newness. Sustainable fashion often focuses on longevity, timeless style. That can clash with shoppers who love trends.
So sustainable brands need to work on being seen as stylish and desirable in their own right.
Absolutely. But again, paradoxes. That higher price we talked about. It can also signal quality and durability to some, which is positive.
Right.
Yet, one study found that people who really value durability were sometimes less likely to buy sustainable, maybe because of those old stereotypes linking durable with unfashionable.
Wow. Talk about mixed messages.
It really highlights how complex perceptions are.
Okay, last attribute point. How do those consumption values connect directly to the product?
Right. So thinking about the value you get from the item itself.
Yeah.
Emotional value, feeling good about buying green. Conditional value, maybe getting a discount on a sustainable product. One study found both of those positively influenced JVB. So appealing to emotions and offering smart incentives can work. It's about the overall perceived value proposition.
Got it. So product factors, price, availability, image, overall value are clearly critical pieces of the puzzle. We've covered a ton. But the review wasn't just about findings. It also pointed out weaknesses in the research itself, right?
Yes, and that's really important for context. It's still a growing field. A key limitation is that relatively few studies focus squarely on actual buying behavior. Many looked at intentions or attitudes instead.
Which, as we've said, don't always match reality.
Exactly. It's harder to measure actual purchases.
Yeah.
Another big one is the lack of experimental designs. Most studies are surveys showing correlations, not cause and effect.
So we know things are linked, but not necessarily that one causes the other.
Right. And the reliance on self-reports is a major challenge.
How so? What are the problems there?
Well, people might say they buy more sustainable stuff than they do social desirability bias, wanting to look good. Measures aren't standardized across studies, making comparisons hard. And self-reports often miss the nuance. Was it an intentional, sustainable purchase? How much unsustainable stuff do they also buy? Gives an incomplete picture.
Like reporting the one salad you ate but not the pizza.
Kind of, yeah. Plus, technical issues like common method bias in surveys aren't always addressed well. And there's not much research comparing different types of sustainable products or materials.
And we already mentioned the geographical bias, mostly Western countries, and the samples being mostly young women.
Exactly. Both limit how far we can generalize these findings globally or to other groups.
So lots of room for future research to improve. But despite the limits, did the review offer practical takeaways? Things brands or policymakers could actually do?
Yes, definitely. Based on the findings, they suggested tailoring communication, maybe different messages for different age groups or income levels.
Makes sense. What else?
Really boosting public knowledge about the specific impacts of fashion, not just general awareness, but the concrete details.
Make it real for people.
Exactly. And making the benefits of sustainable choices visible, like those labels showing water saved or CO2 avoided. Tangible positive feedback.
Right, I've seen those. They can be quite compelling.
Mm-hmm. Also, using social proof, showing what's popular, highlighting positive reviews for green products. And crucially, making sustainability info easy to find and understand. Simple scores, clear labels, not jargon.
Cut through the complexity.
Yes. And finally, really working on the image. Promoting sustainable fashion as positive, desirable, stylish using influencers, social media, making it aspirational.
Challenge those old stereotypes head on.
Precisely. Shift it from niche to normal, even desirable.
Those are some really concrete ideas. So wrapping this all up, what are the big takeaways for our listeners?
I think the main thing is that buying sustainable fashion isn't simple. It's driven by this complex mix of who we are, our values, our social world, our habits, and what the products themselves offer.
Right. It's personal, social, practical, all intertwined.
Exactly. And while things like knowledge and positive attitudes help, barriers like price, availability, and image are very real. And sometimes factors pull in opposite directions, like price being both bad and potentially good.
And we really need better ways to measure actual behavior, not just intentions.
Absolutely. Which leads to a question for you, the listener, to think about. Given how much current research relies on what people say they do, how different might our understanding be if we could accurately track actual purchases? What kind of real-world studies could truly show us what tips the balance?
That's a great question, and maybe another one. With so much research focused on the West, what different factors might drive choices elsewhere? How do culture and local context change the game for sustainable fashion globally?
Important points. Lots still to explore.
Definitely. Well, thank you for guiding us through this complex review. Hopefully for you listening, this deep dive has shed some light on why choosing sustainable fashion is such a multifaceted issue. Maybe it's given you some food for thought about your own choices or sparked curiosity to learn more.